Hello and welcome to the Interchange Book 3 Unit 2 video for comparisons. So today we're going to be talking about comparing two different things and all the different possible ways that we can. So let's get started. First, I want you to look at this picture and decide what job is this. So if you're thinking that guy is a dentist, you're correct. Now think about what a dentist does, what their job is and what they do and how much money they make, and think, would you like this job? Why or why not? What would you like? What would you not like? Now look at this job. What job is this? So if you're thinking, it's a person fixing an engine, maybe a car, then it's definitely a mechanic. Again, think about all the things a mechanic does. Well, how much money do they make? What do they do? What are some good things about it, bad things about it? So, would you like this job? So, today we're going to be comparing jobs, and specifically we're going to be comparing a dentist's job versus a mechanic's job. So let's get started. So first, let's start by comparing with adjectives. Adjectives are describing words. So for example, clean, dirty, and difficult are all adjectives. So I'm going to use these to compare being a dentist and being a mechanic. So let's start. Now, if I'm using one syllable or a Y ending, when I use an adjective to compare, I use the adjective and ER, or the adjective and IER. So let's think, which syllables are which adjectives are one syllable? Well, the answer is clean and dirty. So I'm going to say being a dentist is cleaner than being a mechanic. Or, just as an example, being a dentist is dirtier than being a mechanic. Okay? I could also say being a mechanic is dirtier than being a dentist, if I believe that to be true. But the idea is that when it's one syllable, I use ER, for example, clean, ER, cleaner, and dirty, because it has a Y ending, I use the IER, so dirtier. Now, when I have two or more syllables, for example, difficult, that's 3 syllables, difficult, then I need to use more. So I'm going to say being a dentist is more difficult than being a mechanic. Now, let's look at when I want to use something less. If I want to say something is not more, but the opposite, less. Then I can use the adjective, but I don't do anything. So I can say being a dentist is less dirty than being a mechanic. Being a dentist is less clean than being a mechanic. Or being a dentist is less difficult than being a mechanic. And notice I am not changing the adjective. I'm using the normal adjective when I use less. Okay? So again, using the comparison with the adjectives, I need to think one syllable, ER. Y ending, IER. 2 or more syllables, I use more. And for any adjective, I can use less. And don't change the adjective. Good. Okay. So let's look at some more adjectives, like educated and expensive. And I want you to think that between a mechanic and a dentist, are these equal or unequal adjectives that they have? Let's look at expensive. Do you think a mechanic is more expensive or a dentist is more expensive if you visit? Well, in my opinion, I think they are the same. I think that they are equal. So if I think they are equal, I'm going to say a mechanic is as expensive as a dentist. Now, notice when I use as and then the normal adjective and then again as, that's when I think that the two things are equal. I'm not really comparing them, I'm saying that they are equal. Okay? Now, if I think something is unequal, for example, educated, right? I think a dentist definitely is more educated than a mechanic. So I'm going to use the negative. I'm going to say a mechanic isn't as educated as a dentist. So notice when I'm using the negative isn't, and I'm still using as and as, but now it's saying that they are unequal. So this says that the dentist is more educated. So that's when I want to say if things are equal or unequal with my adjective. I use as and as, or maybe isn't as, and again as, and also the normal adjective. Good. Okay, so we're going to look at the last way that we compare using adjectives. Now, we're going to use a special type of adjective for this, and that's a past participle that we use like an adjective. Now, a past participle, if you remember, is a type of verb. It's the form of a verb. We have the base form of a verb, which is things like these. We have a simple past, right? And then we have another one called the past participle. So let's think. What's the past participle of pay? Well, that's paid. Educate, educated. Trust, trusted. Respect, respected. Now, I can use past participles just like adjectives, okay? Not all past participles, but some past participles I can use like an adjective. And if I use them like an adjective, I can compare them too, okay? So if I think a dentist, right, and a mechanic, I'm going to look at the first idea, paid, okay? Well, if I think of the quantity of pay, I can use more and less. The quality, I can use better and worse, and I can compare them. So a dentist is more paid than a mechanic, or a dentist maybe is better paid than a mechanic. So the quantity of the pay is more, and the quality of the pay is better. Okay, so I'm using that past participle as an adjective with more, less, better, and worse. Okay, let's look at the next one. Educated. Okay, who's more educated, mechanic or a dentist? Well, I think a dentist. So I could say a dentist is more educated than a mechanic, right? Obviously, have more education. But maybe I can think the quality too, and I could think, well, yeah, a dentist is better educated than a mechanic, right? They have a better quality of education. Okay, now I'm going to change these a little bit, and we'll see how I can use the things with less and worse. Trust, for example, and the past participle trusted as an adjective. Who do you think do you trust more, your dentist or the mechanic? Personally, I don't trust the mechanic. They never give me a good price for the fixing of the car, so I'm going to say a mechanic is less trusted than a dentist. Okay. Let's look at, for example, respect. Again, I could think, well, which one do you respect more, a mechanic or a dentist? Well, I respect the mechanic less, so I'm going to say a mechanic is less respected. Let's look at pay. Who is paid more? Well, definitely a dentist is paid more, or paid better. I can say a mechanic is paid worse, or maybe paid less, right? A mechanic is less paid, or a mechanic is worse paid. Same thing with education. I can think a mechanic is worse educated than a dentist. Okay? So this is how I'm using the past participle with adjectives, okay? And I'm using to compare using the quantity, thinking more of the adjective or less of the adjective. Also with quality, I can use better and the adjective, and worse and the adjective. Good. Okay, so we're going to look at another type of comparing with nouns. Remember, nouns are like things that are ideas, objects, things, okay? So for example, education. Education is an idea, that's a noun. Money is an object, that's a noun. Tools. Tools are these things. So this is a mechanic's tools. These are dentist tools. They're objects, so those are nouns. And clients. Clients are the people that go to a business. And again, those are nouns. So how can we compare using these things? Well, you can think that using more and less, you can talk about the quantity of a noun. If you use better and worse, you can talk about the quality of a noun. And we can use another type of comparative adjective to also talk about what type of a noun are we comparing. So let's just put these in here: education, money, clients, and tools, for example. So you can think of your own sentences, but for example, I think a dentist has more education than a mechanic. Okay? I think that a dentist also has more money than a mechanic. Okay? I think that a dentist has less clients than a mechanic, right? And I think that a dentist has less tools than a mechanic. Less tools. So I'm using more and less to talk about the quantity of these nouns. Now again, I can use better and worse to talk about the quality. So if, for example, a dentist has better education than a mechanic, maybe I wouldn't talk about the quality of the money, so that doesn't make sense. Or maybe not even the quality of the clients, but definitely the tools. Which one has a better quality? Nah, I think the dentist has better tools than a mechanic. Okay? Good. Now, I just want to look at tools to talk about the last type of comparison. And I'm going to use the adjective small, but I want it to be a comparison. So smaller. Smaller is the comparison. So if I think, well, which one has smaller tools? Well, if I look, definitely the dentist has small tools for the mouth, and I know a mechanic has big tools for the car, so I'm going to say a dentist has smaller tools than a mechanic. So again, using nouns, okay, for example, tools, I can talk about the quantity of tools, more or less tools than. I can talk about the condition or the quality of the tools, better and worse tools than. Or I can use another type of comparative adjective, for example, smaller tools than. And I'm using those to compare with my nouns. Good. Okay, now again, I want to look at the idea of equal and unequal when we talk about nouns and comparing, okay? So are a mechanic and a dentist, are they equal when we think about these nouns? Okay? Now, first I want to talk about the type of nouns we're looking at. So, for example, count nouns. Count nouns are nouns that you can count. You can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can count them. So that's applicable with tools. I have 2 tools or I have 1 tool. That's okay. Clients. Okay, I have 2 clients or I have 1 client. That's okay. I can count those. Now, education and money are non-count nouns. That means I cannot count them. So I cannot say I have 1 education or 2 educations. No, I can't say that. So I can't count it. Money, same thing. I cannot count it. I can't say 10 monies. No, no, no. So these are non-count nouns, okay? And these are important when we compare, especially when we're saying they're equal or unequal. So let's think, okay? Now, if I say that 2 things are equal, I'm always using the as and as, remember from that before. But it's important to think, well, for count nouns I use many, and for non-count nouns I use much. So if I want to say 2 things are equal, I can say a mechanic has as many tools as a dentist. Again, many for the count noun tools. A mechanic has as many clients as a dentist, right? So this means that a mechanic and a dentist are equal in the amount of tools and the amount of clients they have, okay? Again, if I'm going to use a non-count noun, then I'm using much. So a mechanic has as much education as a dentist. Maybe that's not true, but that's an example. Or money, a mechanic has as much money as a dentist. Again, maybe that's not true, but it's an example. But remember, I'm using much for the non-count nouns. And I'm using as and as to say that they're equal. Well, how do I say that they are unequal? Well, to do that, I have to change the verb has, and I want to make it negative. So the negative of has is doesn't have. So if I want to say they are not equal, I'd say a mechanic doesn't have as many tools or as many clients as a dentist. And that means that the dentist has more, right? The dentist wins, right? Or a mechanic doesn't have as much education as a dentist. Or a mechanic doesn't have as much money as a dentist. Again, so they are not equal if I say doesn't have as much. or they're not equal if I say doesn't have as many. But remember, I need to use many for count nouns and much for the non-count nouns. Good. Okay, the last way that we're going to compare is comparing with verbs, actions. So for example, works and earns. Remember, earns is the amount of money that the person makes, okay? So who does these things more? Who works more? Who earns more? Well, let's talk about it. So again, we can use more and less to talk about who does the verb more or who does the verb less. So for example, a dentist works more than a mechanic. Or maybe a dentist works less than a mechanic. Or a dentist earns more than a mechanic. Or a dentist earns less than a mechanic, okay? So using the verb and then more and less to talk about the amount that the person does the verbs, okay? Now again, we can talk about equal and unequal, right? So if I use the verb and then as much as. So remember, that's when I want to talk about two things that are equal. So I could say a dentist works as much as a mechanic, or a dentist earns as much as a mechanic. And again, that's saying that they make the same amount of money or they work the same amount of time. If I'm using as much as, right? That's equal. But how do we make it unequal? Well, you have to make the verb negative, right? And if I'm going to make the verb negative, right, then I have to think about a dentist doesn't work as much as. So I don't need the S now because that's the S on doesn't. That's the S, the third person on the negative. So a dentist doesn't work as much as a mechanic, or maybe a dentist doesn't earn as much as a mechanic. So remember, the unequal, I make the verb negative, okay? So this is how I'm comparing with verbs, using the verb with more and less, or using the verb with as much as to compare. Good. So I hope this was helpful in explaining how we are comparing with adjectives. And with adjectives, we can use past participles as adjectives, and using comparing with nouns, and using comparing with verbs. So, good luck.